Welcome back. This is the lesson where our React frontend finally shakes hands with the real FastAPI backend. Lesson 8 wired the data layer. Lesson 9 wires identity. The mental model is simple. A JWT is a key card. You post credentials to the token endpoint. The backend signs a token, and from then on, every protected request carries an authorization bearer header. An AuthContext exposes user, login, and logout to the whole tree. And just like that, the full-stack TypeScript story becomes operational. Here are the 4 mental models we're locking in today. First, the JWT itself, 3 base 64 parts, signed by the backend, impossible for the front-end to forge, and stateless, so the server holds nothing. Second, the login call, a form-encoded post to /token, OAuth2 spec, returning access token and token type, the exact contract our FastAPI backend already serves. Third, AuthContext, one place, globally accessible via useAuth, no prop drilling. And fourth, ProtectedLayout, a wrapper that checks the token and bounces you to log in if it's missing. Together, that's the real app auth pattern. Let's wire up the actual handshake. Notice the body is URL search params, not JSON. That's the OAuth2 spec, and it's the single most common mistake when consuming a FastAPI token endpoint. We wrap the request in useMutation, so we get loading and error states for free, and on success we do 2 things. Push the token into AuthContext via setToken, then navigate to the cart. That's the full round trip. Form to token to JWT to global store. So where does that token actually live? Right here, in AuthContext. The shape is small and deliberate. Token, user, a setter, and logout, all typed through an auth value interface so consumers get full autocomplete. The senior move is on the provider itself. We persist the token in local storage, derive the user by decoding the JWT payload, and then wrap the whole value in useMemo. Without that memo, every render hands children a brand new object reference, and you get re-render storms across the entire tree. Now that the token has a home, we need a single place to use it. Meet apiClient, a typed fetch wrapper. The trick is the module-level getToken function, which auth provider wires up at startup, so the wrapper stays decoupled from React. Every call auto-attaches the bearer header, parses JSON, and, critically, intercepts 401s to force a logout and redirect. One place to read the token, one place to handle expiry. That's the contract. With the token and the client in place, we need to gate the UI. React Router 7 makes this elegant through nested layouts. ProtectedLayout reads the token from context. If it's missing, navigate redirects to login. If it's there, outlet renders the child route. Public routes like login, register, and the product list sit outside the wrapper. The senior move. Auth lives in a layout, not sprinkled across every page component. Now, tokens don't live forever. FastAPI stamps every JWT with an XP claim, and once that moment passes, every protected call comes back as a 401. The pattern here has 3 moves. Decode the payload by base 64, parsing the middle segment of the JWT, write an isExpired helper that compares XP times 1000 against date, now, and wire a use effect in auth provider that nulls the token the moment it goes stale, which automatically triggers the redirect we just built. For longer sessions, you'd add refresh token rotation, but most apps don't need that until sessions outlive 30 minutes. With the core flow working, here are 6 reflexes that separate auth, that ships from auth that survives review. Wrap your context value in useMemo, so a new object reference doesn't re-render every consumer. Centralize 401 handling in one apiClient interceptor instead of sprinkling it across components. Never log tokens. They end up in Sentry. For XSS-prone apps, prefer HTTP-only cookies over local storage. Split your XOD schemas into user and public user so routes only expose what they need. And remember, the front end is UX, The backend is the security boundary. It revalidates every single request. Pin this one. 12 patterns covering the full JWT lifecycle in React, from the form-encoded post to the token endpoint, through typed context with a memoized value and a useAuth hook, decoding the payload with ATOB to check expiry, guarding routes with outlet and navigate, and persisting the token through use local storage. If you can recall what each of these 12 does without looking, you've internalized the lesson. Now the 5 mistakes that look like working auth but quietly ship security holes. 1. Never log raw tokens. Sentry and Datadog auto-capture everything, and your tokens live forever in the error tracker. 2. Hiding a button is not security. Curl doesn't care about your React tree, so the backend must validate every protected request. 3. Tokens belong in the authorization header, never the query string where they leak into logs and browser history. 4. Memoize your provider value, or every consumer re-renders on every change. And 5. The senior move, decode the JWT payload for UI hints if you want, but never trust it for authorization. Only the backend's signature check counts. Time to build it. 3 exercises that wire everything together against the real FastAPI backend from the companion series. First, take the login form from Lesson 06 and wire it to the auth token endpoint, React hook form, ZOD, real JWT coming back. Second, build the AuthContext and auth provider with use local storage, memoized value, JWT decode for the user. This becomes the capstone's identity layer. Third, a protected layout using React Router 7 nested routes that gates AuthCart, orders, and profile behind useAuth. 5 lessons converging into one working login. And that's Lesson 09 in the bag. JWT login, AuthContext, bearer requests, protected routes. Your React app now speaks fluently with a real FastAPI backend, the same way every production app does it. Next up, we shift tags from advanced to professional and step into Lesson 10, React, 19 server components and actions. Render on the server, mutate from the client like calling a normal function. See you there.